councillors, staff, media, invited guests and all those at home listening in. Welcome to the council meeting of Wednesday the 9th of August, and I'll call for apologies, and I do have an apology for lateness at this stage for Councillor Mackle. Everyone else is here, so move in a second. Do we receive that? Councillor Mellon, Councillor Brown, all in favour please say aye. Carried. Item number 2, extraordinary business. I know of none. Okay, declarations of interest, item number 3. Any declarations of interest on matters of today's agenda? No. Move on to the confirmation of the minutes. Actually, we do have one apology from Tawera King. He was going to be here today for an opening karakia, but he's postponed and he will be here on the next council meeting of 23rd of August. So welcome Tawera then. Councillor Cameron?
I want to comment on the confirmation of the minutes, please.
Okay, we'll move on to the confirmation of the minutes. And any alterations or additions on page 3?
Yes, page 3 to 4. I'm not sure I moved that the parking time restrictions be reviewed because I didn't want them reviewed.
Okay,
I recorded my vote against that, I think, as well.
Okay, we'll have a look and just see who did move and second it.
Thank you.
It may have been the Mayor who moved it, but we'll just check that for accuracy. Thank you. Page 4 or 5. Page 6. No, so I'd like to move that the minutes of the 25th July Council meeting be taken as read and confirmed. As amended, if needed, yeah. They will be amended, yeah. Councillor Lovett, Councillor Cameron, all in favour, please say aye. Carried, thank you. And we'll move on to item number 5, the method. Oh, sorry, we won't. We will move into the presentation from James Cagle from Wakakatahi. James, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
And you have a presentation. So if you'd like to go through your presentation, James, and do you want to take questions at the end?
Perfect.
Okay.
No, that's great.
Great.
So, look, Mr. Mayor, councillors, my intention today is to run through a presentation largely focused on the corridor that you can see identified on the first slide. So, State Highway 1, Templeton to Ashburton, and talk a bit about the Selwyn side of things, but mostly focus on the south of the Rakaia River. I understand that I'm certain that you will have questions beyond this project, so I'll try my best to get through this, and then we'll get to where we need to. Right. So look, background, and when I do these sorts of presentations to council, I feel a bit awkward because I'm telling you about your own community, and frankly, you do already know this because you live this, but the corridor south of State Highway 1 south of Christchurch is an exceptionally busy one. 10 to 14,000 vehicles per day, depending on where we're talking about. As the agency in our current approach, we prioritise infrastructure investment on corridors where the volume is over 6,000 vehicles a day. So we're well in that band for this corridor. You're well aware it's got multiple side roads. It has a very poor safety record, which I will get to very shortly. And we have been out and talked to the community in prior years and prior iterations of this program to understand what their views are. It's worth noting, I'll come back to it later, that we did consult towards the end of last year on a series of speed reductions in and around Rakaia and the bridge itself, which I'll pick up. We're waiting for the final regulatory sign-off on that, but those are well in train in terms of a response in this corridor. So apologies that the numbers on the picture are a little difficult to see. I can get you copies if you are actually interested in particular, but this is the crash history map on the south of Rakaia stretch, so that's the river through to Ashburton over the last 10 years. So for Rakaia to Ashburton, we've had 1 fatal, 14 serious injuries and 78 minor injuries. Crash history is just one aspect of what we look at when we look at corridor safety improvements. As I say, volume is one of the most important factors. That reporting comes from the New Zealand Police, so timeliness of data upload can be an issue. If there are recent incidents, they're usually not captured. But we're not looking at this sort of data from the point of view of identifying hotspots. Hotspots are important if we're talking about particularly intersection issues, but it's our experience in the research that about 60% of crashes don't occur where they have occurred before. So we're looking sort of at the overall risk rating on the corridor, its comparison to other corridors like it elsewhere in the country, and we're fairly confident that we can predict the likely incidence of deaths and serious injuries on a corridor like this, just not exactly where they're going to occur. It's worth noting, because it comes to our approach to date, that the northern section of this corridor, so the Selwyn side of the river, has a much higher level of deaths and serious injuries. So, just briefly, the numbers for Templeton to Rakaia are 21 fatals, 67 serious, and 140 minor over the last 10 years. So it's a significant step up on the Ashburton side, which is why, to date, some of you may remember I spoke to you about this 2 years ago, but to date we have focused north of the river as opposed to coming south. So as I say, targeting medium to high risk highway corridors around New Zealand as part of our speed and infrastructure program. Crashes happen for many reasons. I've said this to you before, I know, but it's really important to dwell on the second bullet point there. About 70% of serious injury crashes, people have been following the road rules. This isn't necessarily about eliminating bad behaviour and solving our road trauma problem. This is about flipping that script and understanding the consequence of a crash and trying to do our best to mitigate the outcome as opposed to the cause. Causal factors definitely matter, but our primary purpose here is to remove the trauma that is caused when people make mistakes, or bad things happen to them because other people made mistakes. We've got a live example in the press around Christchurch this week and last week from a woman killed by a 14-year-old, getting into a vehicle and presumably making a mistake. The woman driving along West Coast Road wasn't doing anything wrong that we were aware of, and has paid with her life. So these sorts of interventions are trying to remove that kind of risk primarily from the corridor. And as I know I've said to you in the past, this sits as part of our General Road to Zero strategy, which is the New Zealand Government Road Safety Strategy. So that's mostly Waka Kotahi, New Zealand Police, ACC, and other supporting. But draw your attention to the list on the right of that slide. Infrastructure improvement, speed management is only one of 5 focus areas in order to reduce deaths and serious injuries on our roads, and the others are very important. But infrastructure investment and speed management accounts for a significant proportion of the reduction that we expect to be able to make over the period. That said, we need to make progress in all of these areas if we are to reduce deaths and serious injuries on our road. So look, briefly, as I said, we have been out and talked to the community in the past, in this community around 2017 and 2018. And the list on the slide you can see here are the sorts of things that were raised with us in terms of road safety for the community. I've got to acknowledge, because I don't enjoy it, it's an impressive feat of engineering, but crossing the Rakaia Bridge is challenging, particularly at that speed. It's very narrow, it's very old. It's important that we maintain it and keep it open. The biggest risk actually to closure for the Rakaia Bridge is a crash on it. It's such a wide river that it doesn't suffer from some of the problems that I'm sure we will talk about on the Ashburton Hakateri, or indeed further south on other bridges. But if a truck, or if there is a motor vehicle crash on the Rakaia Bridge, we're going to have to close the bridge to clear it. And as well as I do, that the disruption caused by that is significant. So as I said, we have already looked at addressing speeds through Rakaia. I'm happy to talk to you if you are interested about the process for addressing speeds in and around your settlements, if that's of interest to you and continues to be of interest to you. We've tried to work with you on some parts of Methven and State Highway 77 as well, and hope to have positive news in that regard soon. There's no doubt that traffic volumes on this corridor are growing. They've grown substantially in my memory, and I think will continue to grow as the economy grows in Canterbury. It's clearly a key strategic route. There can be no doubt on a highway of this kind that crossing the centre line is probably the biggest risk that people face. When you're travelling at speeds of 100 kilometres an hour and you are divided by a painted line, things go wrong. People's attention wanders or something happens, and there isn't margin for error with such a narrow centre line. Walking and driving can be difficult. Parking, particularly around Rakaia and accessing the retail opportunities there, can be challenging. And turning in and out of the state highway, particularly when associated with those traffic volumes, is also obviously challenging, particularly if you're not familiar with it. So from our feedback, people supported use of rumble strip, wide centre line, flexible median barriers, certainly something that we support the use of, and I'll talk to that. Widened shoulder, I'll talk to that too, and as I say, a review of the speed limits through Rakaia and across the bridge, and we are in the process of addressing that. But I want to step you through, if I can, our general approach to a corridor like this. This is the current state. Oh, it's shown up slightly odd, but this is the current state of the road corridor width for the stretch of State Highway. So it's probably actually at the upper bound of that at the moment, about 9.5 metres wide, typically. So you've got two general traffic lanes of 3.5 metres wide and about 1.3 metres of shoulder. That's typical, excepting that you've got passing lanes and different, and other opportunities. What we would like to do is widen that corridor out to about 11.5 metres. So in the first instance, that increases each side of the road from, as you see, 4.8 to 5.7. So it's about a metre each side. That allows us to then come in and move the traffic lanes and produce a wide centre line. So if you imagine a 1.5 metre centre line down the middle, we've managed to achieve that because we've built out and strengthened the shoulder. You've still got enough shoulder to pull over when you need it, but we've managed to create the room in the centre to move vehicles away from each other. At that point, having achieved that, we, in general, look for immediate safety opportunities. Where are the places where no one would object, no one will be troubled by putting median barrier in that centre line? Where are there stretches where there are no access ways? All you're doing is putting in the barrier to stop cars from hitting each other when the worst happens. And then finally, you get to a corridor treatment where, median barrier is going to impose some difficulty on some people, and at that point we need to upgrade things like roundabouts to provide turning opportunities, or what we call jug handles or J-turns to provide people turnaround opportunities and those sorts of things. So that's how we stage a corridor treatment like this. For your purposes, for the purposes of State Highway 1, particularly Rakaia to Ashburton, so the southern half of the corridor that we're focused on, I really want to focus on point 1 and point 2. The most important thing to understand is, in our experience, it takes 5 times as long for us to get through the process of widening and strengthening a shoulder than it does to ultimately get to the point of putting in barrier. And actually, the most important part is the first bit, is the widening, is getting to a wider corridor that moves vehicles apart from each other and gives us all a better corridor to play with. This is just a visual overlay of what that ends up looking like. In this instance, it's all widened from one side. There are plenty of instances where this is the case in this corridor. Just think you've got the railway corridor hard up against it. We've got no room to go one side. We have to go to the other side. So you build out on one side, build the road corridor out, move the lane over, paint the median in, and you can imagine quite quickly, I think, just how much more room that gives you from oncoming traffic and preserving the ability for vehicles to pass one another, agricultural vehicles, those sorts of things that are a daily part of using this corridor. So where we're at now, and why, frankly, I'm here today, is we want to and are initiating conversations with your officers about that shoulder strengthening and widening. So that's typically, depending on the particular stretch of road, about 1.5 to 2 metres worth of extra road width. We need to start talking to property owners about where we need to buy land, where we need to go outside the current road reserve. We need to do geotech investigations. We need to understand where the services are, and this council's done a very good job of removing power poles, which in itself has a safety benefit. So we no longer have power poles to contend with, but we do need to understand where the services are so that we're not getting in the way of each other. And you'll understand that that's a reasonable amount of technical work to be done, and that's why typically that road widening takes such a long time to get processed and done, because there's a lot to understand. As I say, that's where we sit. Our focus really has been prioritising the more dangerous stretch of the corridor, so the Selwyn side. We're a little further on there, but you won't have seen yet, us going out publicly with what that actually looks like in the corridor, because we're not quite there yet, even there to the north of the river, and we're even further behind south of the river. But we're confident we want to get on with that widening work. But, as I say, our priority will be making sufficient progress north of the Rakaia and then beginning the conversations with the community south of the Rakaia, your community, and check in, make sure we understand what we heard when we came out in 2018, and that people are confident and comfortable with what we propose. But that shouldn't, in our view, preclude the work to widen the corridor, because that is in everyone's interest. And that's where we're at.
Question. Thanks, James. Very well presented. It explained a lot. The diagrams, as the males around the table would understand that. We like the visuals, and I'm sure the girls do too. But yeah, it makes more sense than what I've heard in the past of your program. So I'm sure there's some questions there. But one question I have: if you started tomorrow and you went from Rakaia to Ashburton, how long would that take to widen the road?
Presuming that we'd already acquired all the property, we knew where everything was.
Yeah, you actually started.
I don't actually. I'm not actually sure. It's the work we would ordinarily, that kind of work we would put through what we call our NOC, who are our maintenance contractors. So as they go and maintain the road, we'd task them with doing the widening. I'm sorry, Neil. I can come back with a speculative answer, but it's
probably a couple of years' work.
Yeah, a couple of years' work. It's a long stretch of road.
It is. Yeah. It's 30 odd K.
Even though it's relatively simple and straight and flat.
Yep. Some of the early plans I saw was a roundabout at Rakaia. Is it still on the cards?
I don't know where we're at in detailed design, but those are the sorts of things you get to when you start putting in barrier, because you need to provide people the opportunity to turn around. If they can't cross because there's barrier, they need to be able to go down the road a short distance, turn around and head in the other direction. So, yeah, those sorts of things are what you would ultimately look at when we got to full safety treatment on the corridor.
Great.
But we need to get on with widening first.
Yep. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Hi, James. I've got a couple of questions from some of our members of the Road Safety Steering Group. So we had had a meeting last week, and obviously this came up in discussion, and I've got two questions, if that's okay. The first one's from Jim Crouchley, who's actually happens to be sitting right there. But I'll just read it out. What is proposed where a farmer owns land on both sides of the road where a wire rope barrier is to be installed? Will he get provision by way of a gap in the barrier to allow him vehicle and machinery access freely on his property? So I think there's an instance down in South Canterbury, and you may be quite aware of it.
I am.
Where they own both sides of the road. There's about 4.5 k's where they have to travel down the road and back again just to access the other side of their farm.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important for us to talk to community members and property owners, because look at a map, you don't necessarily know that you've got that kind of activity taking place on the state highway. I mean, you can speculate that it happens somewhere, but you need to know exactly where it's happening. So I think the instance you're referring to is an instance in South Canterbury. We've got a similar project, Timaru to St Andrews, but I can think of another instance in North Canterbury, actually. In both cases, yeah, look, where that kind of activity is taking place, it's not reasonable to ask the farm business to move its stock down 4.5 kilometres, say, to turn around and come back just across the road. We would look to put a break in.
Yeah, thank you.
Second
All
question.
good, Jim. And the second question is from John Skivington, who's our AA councillor. He's asking how house and heavy removal operators are expected to operate safely since their pilot vehicle will be unable to access both lanes to stop traffic, which is a necessary part of their operation, and many removals use both lanes in many places. And he's also said, how is it proposed to handle traffic build-up behind ag vehicles travelling at 20 to 40 k's?
Both good questions too. Excellent. So look, start at the second one first. That's part of why we need to road widen, right? I mean, theoretically, we could put barrier in on a narrow corridor, but if we do that, then you're never going to get past agricultural vehicles. Emergency vehicles are going to get stuck. All of that. So widening the corridor, making sure that there is still room beyond the 3.5 metre, vehicle lane is really important for that. I can't hand on heart give you a categorical assurance on every part of this stretch that wouldn't occur if we put median barrier in, but yeah, the point of moving to an 11.5 metre corridor is to provide the width enough that vehicles can pull over and large vehicles can pull over and large vehicles can still get past at the same time. Now, to move to the truly large, which is the first part of the question, really big over dimensioned vehicles. Again, you need frequent enough breaks in the barrier that pilot vehicles can get access to other lanes. You obviously don't have access all of the time, but enough to make that sort of thing practical. State Highway 1 has to be able to operate as an over-dimensioned vehicle route. It simply does. So it's on us to design something that works with that context.
Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, James, and I enjoyed your presentation. I have a few questions, if I may.
Sure.
The first one is, I looked, when you put that wee map up with the little round circles,
Yeah.
it was 139 crashes or dings or whatever in Ashburton. Where are they in Ashburton? Down the bottom?
Yeah, I do. I don't know on that map. I'm sure I can get you the data that shows you in more detail for you, if that's of interest.
And are they, and I'd also like to know how recent they are.
So that's over 10 years. So
Yeah,
that's,
but can we titrate that into yearly breakdowns?
Again, I'm sure I can get you a
That would be quite
breakdown.
interesting, because we've had a few changes
Yeah.
down there. The other question, I just want to make a comment. I think I spoke to you a couple of years ago with regards to the roundabout at Walnut Avenue and
Yes.
how that was going to improve the flow through the town.
Yep.
It doesn't appear to have done that. Have you got any feedback on that, please, and are you measuring that?
I'm sure we will be measuring it. I don't have direct feedback that says it has or hasn't worked, but I can inquire and see where our monitoring is
I
at.
remember at the time, and you probably recall it.
Oh, no, I do recall.
I was thinking,
Yeah.
I don't understand how
Yeah.
it could improve the flow, and I can't visually see it, and it's just like by a little one vehicle every day or something.
So, bearing in mind that I can get myself into trouble when I say these sorts of things because
Yes.
I'm not a transport expert in that sense. So I'll look to Neil to rescue me when I go too far. My understanding basically is a roundabout works really well when traffic flows are balanced,
Yes,
because each side can get an opportunity to get into the roundabout, and
Sure.
once you start unbalancing a roundabout, it starts to really bind up, and the traffic volume on State Highway 1 is such that lights allow you to work on the phasing. It will absolutely be true for Walnut Ave that we will be monitoring the phasing. I know because we've got the screens up in the office.
Yeah.
I can often look and see what's happening in Walnut Ave, right? We will be monitoring the phasing to make sure that we've got it right. We will absolutely
sure.
be tweaking it.
Yeah.
But that's why you move up in that sense to sets of lights, because you've no longer got the balance at a roundabout to make it work properly.
I suppose the phasing is one point, but the other point is it actually improving for us in the cars, the
Yep.
traffic through, the time from, say, Walnut Avenue
Yes.
to other side of town?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, that was my question.
To just give you a stick to
Yeah.
hit me with, if I may, I am absolutely certain total, network-wide improvement
Yeah.
from Walnut Ave will come even more when we've completed Tynwald
Sure.
and secured a second bridge. Because that sort of, that network-wide effect will be much more
And so
complete.
if you are measuring that, can you supply those as well at some stage, please?
Happy to.
Thank you. The other thing is you mentioned the Rakaya Bridge and how narrow it is and potentially quite dangerous and a lot of traffic going over it. I think you mentioned, was it 14,000 vehicle movements per day? No, 10 to 14.
10 to 14, yep.
So what has been done about that?
At this stage, we are maintaining it, to keep it in a fit state, to keep it open as absent an event like a crash on it. We don't have in the short term plans for capital expenditure to replace it. It gets talked about from time to time. It is something we would almost certainly consider as part of corridor studies to understand the upgrade of this corridor. And it has been mentioned in recent discussions about the upgrade of this corridor that the bridge would be something that you would look to.
Because it seems, from my perspective, sitting here, it seems unusual to highlight that as a possible area for very dangerous.
It is.
For accidents and things, but we're ignoring that and we're widening the roads in areas that may not be as dangerous.
So look, the entire corridor is unsafe from that point of view. To contextualise the investment, the funding area that pays for this sort of intervention pays for what we call standard safety interventions. Okay. So those things are wire rope barriers, roundabouts, race safety platforms, and the like. It simply doesn't have capacity to do large bridge replacements, for example.
No.
But yeah.
No, I understand that, and I presume, that's why I asked the question.
Fair
I
enough.
was surprised that we're spending a lot of money on other areas where perhaps we get better bang for our buck if it was in terms of safety.
So in the absence of being able to afford infrastructure to improve the bridge, the appropriate safety response is to reduce the speed on the bridge, and we will take that.
Okay, and you'll look at that.
And we're doing that.
And I have, of course, I've got the standard question about our bridge. How far away is that? But we'll talk about that later.
We'll come on to that.
Yeah. And I have one more question, please, Mr. Mayor.
Relating to the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah.
With regards to the way stations between,
Yes.
is that not, and I know you've mentioned you counselled widely for that and sought feedback widely, and I don't know all the feedback you've received, but the feedback I've received, it wasn't in an ideal position and could be risky for people as the trucks sort of grind out from the, slowly. Was that considered when the state, in the spot that was?
It absolutely was. It was considered as part of the safety audit for that site.
So it was considered very little or no risk, presumably?
The most important aspect for that is, again, reducing the speed. So when I talk about the speed reductions around Rakaya and the bridge, I'm actually also talking about a speed reduction that starts north of the rail bridge. So if you know the approach to the Rakaya Bridge coming south,
the windy bit.
yeah, that's exactly it. So we will be reducing the speed from north of the rail bridge all the way through, frankly, to the Rakaya
Because of
Township.
the way station, or?
So the speed reduction north of the river will be because of the way stations, and then the speed reduction on the bridge because of the bridge, and the speed reduction in Rakaya Township because of the township. So they're different reasons.
I suppose my only comment is it's a shame we had to reduce our speed because of way stations weren't there previously. It would be wonderful if they were in a dead other spot.
I understand, but again, heavy vehicle compliance is an exceptionally important part of road safety.
Yes, thank you. Hey, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks. James, just on that, the speed reduction in Rakaya itself, the township, when is that likely to be implemented?
So we have submitted the interim speed management plan to the Director of Land Transport, who has an independent statutory function, even though he works within Waka Kotahi, for validation about a month ago. So we're waiting for that approval to come through. When I have it, I'll tell you.
And Methven will be the same time?
Yeah, at the same time.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
I look at a beautiful picture on there of 4 lanes of lovely traffic flowing between Christchurch and Ashburton. I can't see any narrowing signs at the end. But when you negotiate with the landowners, obviously when you do it once and do it right, will you be negotiating with them to have the corridor wide enough for 4 lanes in the future? Because obviously once you've negotiated that right away. They're not going to build a house there. They're going to understand, will that be done to, because obviously that's the golden, what we want to get to, so that it drives Ashburton's economic development.
I understand. We do it within the constraints that are set for us. So today I am sitting to you, talking to you within the constraints of the current government policy statement on land transport, which governs effectively the funding that we've got for the 21-24 period. The Minister of Transport has committed to releasing a draft of the next government policy statement by the end of this month, and that will almost certainly guide the forward work program for 24-27, which would include this sort of work. So, sitting here today, we have only a limited ability to improve the corridor within the confines of this speed and infrastructure program. So it probably doesn't meet your request, councillor. We will see what our guiding parameters for 24-27 look like, depending on both what the minister issues by the end of this month, but also, frankly, the outcome of the election.
Councillor Lovett?
I'm just going to ask about the Canberra of the road. When you're doing this work, are you going to be addressing all the flooding we have along with it through FET, and there's about 3 pockets of it, address that as well, and the quality of that seal between, I think it's Rakaia down.
That's part of why we get our maintenance contractor to do the road widening, is while they're there doing the seal upgrades or the renewals, they can do the widening at the same time.
Because it's starting to deteriorate quite badly in places. Yeah.
James, Selwyn's, you're well ahead with Selwyn. It's
Further on, I would say. Yeah.
Do you have a start date for when you're going to do the Selwyn side?
Well, the situation with Selwyn, it simply becomes more complicated the closer you get to Christchurch. So it has necessarily been slower, although it is further ahead than south of the river. You'll be aware we've got a substantial New Zealand upgrade program project in and around Rolleston, which includes the upgrade of some of the key intersections, or the key intersections south of Rolleston Duns Crossing. So we need to integrate the work we're doing on the wider corridor with that project and understand what's going on there. And there's a particularly important intersection within the scope of this project at Burnham, which is both exceptionally unsafe but also of key importance to the Defence Force in terms of access there. So it's a more complex piece to land. It's taking longer. We would hope to make substantial progress on that, over this summer and further along. It will still take some time because we've got to do the widening and the rest. So we won't be out to the community with plans until late this year.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor McMillan?
Are you happy for other questions?
Are we all finished with the road
Happy to move
widening? Councillor Todd.
James,
Councillor.
under the, if you look under the health and safety banner, do you think you have a duty of care that the best option for the road should be presented? And Councillor Wilson probably alluded to it. The best option, obviously, is a 4-lane highway. That is the best option. Why should we be settling for something that is not the best option?
So we have, as I said in my answer to Councillor Wilson, we have a statutory duty to give effect to the government policy statement on land transport. This sort of safety intervention is, relatively speaking, low cost and has very strong efficacy, and it is as much as we are able to do given the constraints that are given to us. If those constraints change, then we'll come out and talk to you.
The last time you consulted on it, the speed limit was indicated to be 80 k's. Is that still going to be the case?
Honestly, it would depend on the stretches of road we were talking about. On a piece of road like is in this picture, so it's just passing lanes on both sides, presumed median barrier down the middle because there's no access ways in a passing lane like that, there would be no reason why that speed would need to be reduced. So at the end, if we get to the full safety treatment end of the project, and we've got median barrier in place, so you're physically separated from oncoming traffic, that's perfectly safe to stay at 100.
Thanks, Councillor McMillan. Is your question on the Bridge now, is it?
Yeah.
James, you've sent us a diagram of what triggers the closure of the bridge with river levels, etc. Have you got it there?
I've got,
That's the one?
that's the one.
Yeah.
First start at the top.
Did you perhaps want to present that first?
Look, I'm happy to talk to it. My apologies first of all, and I should have started with the apology. Jessica Forrester, our junior manager, did want to be here. Jessica unfortunately is unwell and couldn't come. I, with the caveat that I am not the expert, I believe I understand enough to be able to answer most questions that are likely to come up here today. And if councillors will forgive me, if I can't, I will undertake to come back to you with answers. But look, just briefly, I know that the TARP, and you'll forgive the acronym, we love acronyms in Wakakotahi, the Trigger Action Response Plan for the bridge is of quite interest because of what happened a fortnight ago. We have, let me just go back one. So we've got a number of TARPs in place across the country. I think we've got about half a dozen or so in Canterbury alone, and we use them to manage unique situations. You know, we have one in place, for example, on the Kaikoura coast to manage storm surge. We've got a number of other bridges around Canterbury where we've got unique situations that need to be managed, and so the TARP really is a mechanical response to the understanding of the vulnerability to the State Highway 1 bridge that emerged post, what were we now, 2019? Yes, 2019. And so you'll see in these two slides the sort of trigger levels, and it is simply about putting in place a managed response as the situation is acknowledged to become higher risk, from the point of view of trying to avoid large disruptions to the bridge, because this community well knows the consequence of a large disruption. It's got really significant impact on you, and frankly, as every councillor south of here tells me, significant impact on them as well. So as you can see, the triggers are largely around river level and debris build-up, or the combination of the two. And they simply trigger a cascading series of escalating responses in order to be able to maintain the risk. You'll be well aware, I'm sure, of, for example, the action of a TARP on the Auckland Harbour Bridge and wind gusts and the closure of lanes on that bridge in order to maintain or protect the structure from damage. So what you saw occur on the 30th was the move to amber, which was basically the river level being at a particular level and there being significant debris build-up. Because I acknowledge that the river level was not nearly as high as we saw in 2019. It was about half that height, and the onset of darkness. And it's the combination of those three factors that triggered the response to close, largely because it is just simply difficult to monitor that dynamic situation in the dark. And what we really want to avoid at night is what happened in 2019, which was damage to the bridge while vehicles were travelling over it. And I hope I have said this to you before, but I'll say it again now. The key things to understand about the State Highway 1 bridge over the Ashburton-Hakatiri is that it has shallow piles, so they do not go down particularly deep into the riverbed, and they are close together. So they catch a lot of debris, and they're not deep. And that combination is particularly wicked given the behaviour of the river at high flow and with debris. I'm sure that you'll have questions, but I mean that's the basic structure of the TARP. It's simply an escalating series of responses in order to manage the structure to protect it from significant disruption, because that would be truly disruptive to the community.
Thank you. At our councillor chat session in the library yesterday, we had a lot of people come up and talk to us,
Sure.
and in particular about the bridge and worried about the debris. I mean, they called it slash. in the river. So there was one question from someone asking about whether anyone had thought about guiding the debris or the slash by driving posts in sort of above the river so that they didn't come in and smash against the piles. I don't know if that's something that happens here. He thought it might have happened up in Gisborne way.
I'm happy to look into it. I haven't heard that particular suggestion. I've heard plenty. I haven't heard that particular suggestion. The challenge isn't so much. It's just it's for a start. It's not slash. It is.
Yes, no, exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
it is trees
Debris,
being ripped
yeah.
out, debris, and they catch quite dynamically, and that's the real challenge. It can escalate quite quickly depending on how things catch. We've said post this event it was something we thought about during the build up, but ultimately weren't confident we could proceed safely. We would very much like to trial in peacetime, if you will, how to manoeuvre debris via a digger, around those piles. There are quite a lot of complications on that bridge, not least of which the clip-ons that sit on it. A digger sitting on the bridge can't actually see past the clip-ons. So I understand, forgive me, this is second-hand because I'm not the expert. Diggers operating near high wires, for example, there aren't high wires there, but I'll use this as an example, can set sort of, if you want, the spatial areas they can't physically move into, that the machinery is stopped from moving into, so they don't hit wires. It's theoretically possible to do the same here for the clip-ons, right? So that you don't accidentally hit the clip-ons. One, because we want to protect the clip-ons. Two, because the staff spotting the debris would have to be on the clip-ons in order to do this. So we think we've got a methodology, but we need to trial it in a not in the heat of the moment, right? We've got to be able to try to do it properly. For example, we probably don't want to use a bucket as opposed to a claw, because again, we don't want to drag the digger into the, there's lots of little detailed things to work out. But we do think we would like to trial ways to manage the debris in a more active way than simply removing it after the fact.
Yeah, thank you. And then I just had a general question, and it was sort of more about the quality of work, and he mentioned that if it's a council road, you can ring up council and sort of have a chat about a pothole or something like that, whereas is Waka Kotahi easily accessible to complain about potholes? Or he was talking about some of the islands in Tynwald where signs had been damaged and run over and nothing was getting done about them. So
look, the bottom line is we should be. We should be accessible to the public if they've seen things. If they want things fixed, we should be logging it properly and be getting back to them promptly. I've spoken before at this council about the size of maintenance budgets generally and the need to prioritise those. One of the things we are looking to in the next funding phase is stronger maintenance and the ability to get further down preventive maintenance and replacement faster. So, but that isn't an excuse for not being responsive, at least giving people who call us or log complaints with us line of sight to the fix.
and there is an 0800 number.
There is an
isn't
0800
Yeah,
number,
I did
0800
think so.
highways. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just following on from that, we use SnapSend Solve for anything water, roads, and it works very well. Do you have, is it linked
We
on the
don't.
highway?
I don't believe we do use SnapSend Solve, although I'm familiar with it as a citizen in Christchurch. But there are other ways to log it with us, and I'm happy to try to supply those to councillors.
Hamish?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Two things, James, particularly the amber status, and it appears from your action that if those events occur on the left, then the closure is only during the dark.
Correct.
So that implies there's a concern that you can't see or monitor what's happening. Has Waka Kotahi considered a spectacularly good lighting solution in the hours of darkness so that it can be monitored and therefore amber wouldn't result in the temporary closure of the bridge?
The short answer, Hamish, is I'm sorry, I don't know, but I'm happy to follow that up and come back to you.
Thank you. And my second question, Mr Mayor, if you can be so bold, is I'm aware through some work in the emergency management area that there is still an opportunity for Waka Kotahi to include local roads that are being affected in an event on the Waka Kotahi website, and that opportunity has not yet been seized. There is some progress in that I understand the Waka Kotahi data on the State Highway Network is now being shared with local websites, but if a driver goes onto the Waka Kotahi website, they can't see the whole picture, they only get the State Highway picture. If they come onto the council website, they do get the whole picture. So it would seem just a tiny step to include all local road closures on Waka Kotahi's website, but I understand that we haven't quite got to that point, and I wonder how we can continue to fruitfully discuss that.
I think the answer lies in your final sentence. It requires a continuation of fruitful discussions. We have had started those discussions, and as you say, we've made some progress. My understanding is the limitation rests on our side with Journey Planner and what it can and can't show and present, but that doesn't take away from the desire or the utility of being able to do so. So we should continue to talk about it and understand when and if that can occur, because I agree it would be very useful if you can see it. We do show in a very limited extent some local roads. For example, the Crown Range is now included on Journey Planner because, frankly, the fact that it's not state highway is of no interest to anyone. People think it is, and so they go there to look for it. But your point more generally in an event still stands, and we should continue that dialogue.
That's right, and perhaps there are many motorists who might not understand that Thompson's Track is not
Thompson's
state
Track would
highway,
be,
so
yep.
the rationale
Yep.
for the Crown Range could be repeated in this district.
Happy to continue to talk because I think it is useful.
Thank you, James.
Councillor Wilson.
It follows on from what just mentioned a wee bit there. I like the look of this. It's clear to all people coming up from Invercargill can actually see they can actually go north. But it does allude to the problem that we only have there's one state highway on this side of the Alps.
Yep.
Why aren't you helping our district to provide that alternative route through Thompson's Track or the Scenic 77 route, which once was a state highway, which was abandoned for some reason? So now we still only have, in the recent event, all three bridges were shut, and Ashburton District must admit some remiss there because it wasn't the bridges, it was a bit of roading, which I'm sure we'll work to alleviate that in the future. But once we've alleviated that, you're going to rely on us to provide access through the South Island for only the minimal funding that we get compared to, the funding that should be going to that. So will there be a look at putting some more money to us to go into Thompson's Track or State Highway 77?
So I think there are two answers to your question, Councillor. The first on the inland scenic route is a discussion that we have had or continue to have at the Regional Transport Committee level. There's an active discussion at the moment about state highway designations and re-looking at them, or whether something is fit to be a state highway or not. I won't, because I won't know where the committee goes, but that will be an interesting discussion to see where we take it in the next 6 months. But honestly, the other point I will raise, because it hasn't yet come up, is we acknowledge the need for a second bridge across the Ashburton. The fact that that one bridge, which is reasonably vulnerable given its construction and age, serves as the only route for major traffic across this side of the island is a major resilience issue. And we've worked well, I think, to date with the District Council on the business plan for the second bridge, and I will be very supportive of progressing that through the Regional Land Transport Plan as we do that at the RTC level over the next 6 to 9 months. We need the bridge.
So because the bridge is, we can't engage a contractor today because we haven't got the go-ahead. So that's almost a bit on the never a wee bit, because it's not actually, is it not easy for you to just tick a box that says we get some extra funding to make these roads more resilient?
It actually isn't, no, because the current government policy statement on land transport doesn't allow us to do that. We are hopeful that we will see a greater focus on resilience work in the next period, but we're not there yet.
Thank you. Just before I go to Councillor Cameron, you mentioned Pier 11, and it's the one that dropped 2 years ago. You mentioned it. So is it compromised? Is it at a lesser strength than the others, or have you got concerns with that pier?
I don't believe so. I just think we watch it more than others because of the historical nature. But one of the challenges we face on managing the bridge is the risk that, frankly, you focus your attention too much on one pier and actually the problem emerges elsewhere because of the dynamic nature of the river.
You'll be looking at them all, watching them
Yeah,
all.
we need to look at all of them.
Yep, thanks. Councillor Cameron.
That's a nice segue for me. That was my question as well. But I'm a little bit worried, James, when you talk about the shallow piles, and also you add to that in the river flow, in the dark, and the clip-ons, and then you add to that the fact that the bridge is elderly. How much are you spending or providing or planning to spend on bridge maintenance annually, Waka Kotahi, on that State Highway 1?
I don't actually have that figure with me, Councillor, but I'm sure I can supply it.
I think that's important to our community, that they gain reassurance as to the viability of what we have got. And also my next point that I'd like to make, is not a question, is those clip-ons, which I've been harping on about for a long time, are scruffy. Like the seal or the tar seal or whatever it is bumpy, because I biked over them the other day. And they're a wee bit unsafe, in my opinion, with the gating, sort of the fence on the outside, and they're very narrow. Have you walked over those clip-ons?
I haven't, but I've observed them closely, as I drove
And
over.
I can take your point with regards to the buckets, or not the buckets, the claws for the diggers to get rid of the pile up. But something needs to be done about that, whether one side can be expanded at the expense of the other, I don't know, but they're inadequate, especially considering our own policies with regards to walking and cycling, and also the government policies with regards to walking and cycling as well. So we're not meeting that demand, and sadly that's your bridge, or Waka Kotahi, not yours personally, and so we cannot influence that. That's outside our remit, and we need something done about that. So it would be very good to know what you plan to spend on it, and until we get our next bridge, which we're hoping you'll come up with the goods this week, we need to know what our plan is while that's coming along. You know, how are we going to mitigate this? This nighttime closing business is fine, but Hamish's suggestion we relight is a really outstanding, simple answer to that. But we can't shut our bridge, because you talked about high volumes being 10 to 14,000 vehicle movements a day. We're doing over 20,000 vehicle movements a day. So, you know, we need that addressed.
Yeah, no, Councillor, I acknowledge the concern, and it's a fair one for the community.
We'll have a budget for that you can share with us.
I will supply the bridge maintenance
Thank you.
figures for you.
Thank you.
I do just want to address the point, though. I don't think the community should be concerned, given the existence of things like the TARP, for the security of the bridge. What we are trying to do here is to maintain the bridge for everyone, which, yes, will at times result in temporary disruptions. But in this instance, the short-term disruption is worth it for the long-term maintenance.
I think we have, subsequent to COVID, a lot of people are feeling isolated
I understand.
and alone, and
Yep.
you close the bridge. I mean, the TARP is just triggers for when you're going to close
Correct.
the bridge. It's not a trigger as to safety or viability or long-term infrastructural quality. It's a trigger that if we get more than this amount of water, or if we get a whole lot of trees, we're going to shut the bridge. So that doesn't mitigate much of our concern. Our concern is the bridge will collapse, kill people, or people can't get to access to their doctors or to the hospital or whatever in an emergency. Or Jim can't, we can't get to whatever we need to do on the other side for our emergency management system. So it's a bit beyond the TARP, is my point.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it, yeah.
When the bridge shut last time, emergency vehicles were still allowed to
Correct,
use
they
the
were.
bridge. Yeah.
Yep.
So that gives reassurance that people can get the care that they need if needed. Councillor Todd?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I suppose the one thing, James, that probably saddens me really is that this project, way before my time, has been going for 10 years with submissions and studies and more submissions and more studies, and we're no longer near to getting to a final solution, that we end up with basically a traffic light system that may or may not allow people across the bridge to the rest of the South Island. You know, we've got to a stage that it's, saddens me really that we're at this stage.
Councillor, I understand. I would just note, I think actually we've made substantial progress in the last 3 years in getting there. I know it's been a long time, and we are entering a key phase. The the next RLTP and the next NLTP, so Regional Land Transport Plan and National Land Transport Plan, will absolutely be critical in terms of realising the community's aspiration. So we're getting there, and when we've made substantial progress. I don't want to pretend that it's as fast as the community would like, but nor have we been sitting still. An awful lot of work has been done by this council with our support to progress that case.
Yeah, 100% correct, James. We've done all the business cases, we've done all that's asked. We're now down to who's funding it. So we've made good progress. And Councillor Todd, if you remember, Christopher Luxton was in town some time ago, and he promised a second bridge in his first term of government if they get elected. So on October, whatever day, 14, if you tick the blue box, well, you'll get a bridge, so they say. So the future will be in your hands. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, James. There's a lot of debris build up at the bridge at the moment. What's your timing plan for removing that? Because if we get another rain event while that's already started to build up, we could be in more trouble. And also with that, do you liaise with ECAN and KiwiRail? Because there's a lot of slash around, or debris around KiwiRail's bridge as well and in between. And it seems pointless if I'm just worried that one person will move the problem from one bridge to the next one, and unless, it's all coordinated and we do it once and do it right.
So starting at the end, yes, we do. I mean, we're typically responsible for the 50 metres upstream of our bridge, which runs straight into the KiwiRail bridge, and they're responsible for the 50 metres upstream of their bridge, and then ECAN further up. So all three of us have to work in concert. You're absolutely right, and we do. As to the particular timing, no, I'm not across what the contractor's up to, but yes, you're right. We do need to move the debris that is there in order to be able to clear, be clear for the next event.
Councillor Hooper.
Thank you. Hi, James. You say the TARP maintains the bridge, and I'm sure it will keep our keyboard warriors very happy. But I want to know, is there any research, or what are you doing to try and alleviate the pier problems? Is there anything, can we go deeper? Can we fire a whole bunch of concrete around them, make them more sturdy? Can there be cross beams? What's been done?
So the simple answer is it's a question of value for money investment. The cost of remediating one pier, given the ability for the problem to shift to, frankly, another one, isn't worth it. It's basically do the lot or don't. And at that point, frankly, we ought to be building a new bridge, and that's the process that we're in now. We know we need the second bridge before we can do this, address the State Highway 1 bridge. So the process as we see it is work with the district on the second bridge, and then we can address the first bridge.
So when we get our second bridge, is there a lifespan on that current bridge?
As long as we manage it appropriately, we can keep this bridge functional within the bounds of the TARP for a few decades to come. But it doesn't, given this framework, it doesn't ultimately solve the severance issues on the state highway. So we would want to move on to planning the next phase as we can.
Just before I go to Lynette, James, on the bridges, the bridges there's going to remain for some time, and the water's going to keep coming down, and the debris is going to come as well. And my third form physics class probably said, if you put something pointy at the top end of the bridge instead of a blunt object, the debris could just hit it and be diverted off and around. Has that been thought of as a solution?
My understanding in this particular instance is the challenge isn't necessarily the bluntness of the piers; it's simply the spacing of the piers. The nature of the debris, and it's the way it chaotically builds up. They're so close to each other that it's not actually going to help the problem.
Thank you, Councillor Lovett.
I just looked at Facebook the other day, and a thing came up and told us that Ashburton Bridge is 93 years old. And the Rakaia must be about the same age.
They'll be similar.
And it really concerns me listening to you that there's no future planning to replace these bridges, whether 10 years out, 30 years out. Is there engineers who are skilled in this field actually physically looking at the bridges from underneath and looking at the state of the concrete, is it perishing, and the metal in the concrete works, looking at the state of these bridges and how long they will last. It's a question that we get asked quite often.
Yep, no, it's a fair question to ask. So the bridges all get detailed structural inspections on a regular cycle. I'm doing this from memory, councillor, so I will through Hamish correct myself if I need to, but I understand the Ashburton has a very detailed structural inspection every 2 years and a more general inspection every year. So it is closely looked at, and the Rakaia and others will be on similar timeframes. You're right. The age of the bridge, is what it is. It's been there for some time. I was in the upper reaches of Clutha District earlier this month, opening a brand new bridge there that replaced one that's 135 years old, single lane wooden bridge, the key connection between Dunedin and Queenstown. We've got a lot of old bridges in the country. In terms of the focus on let's just say resilience in general, but aging structures on the network are a key part of that. As I say, we're guided by the current government policy statement, which does have a key outcome as resilience, but it has been very clearly signalled by this government that, particularly post the North Island weather events, including Cyclone Gabrielle, that they intend to increase the focus on resilience in the period going forward. So we would be hopeful that we can begin to address the significant resilience challenges we have across the national network that way. It will still be a matter of prioritisation though, and as I say, provided we maintain these structures well, they can continue to serve us in their current offering for some period to come.
I think it's, the weights that are going over the bridges with these heavy trucks and backing up on the Rakaia. So if you go underneath it in a jet boat and those big vehicles, you can see the movement, and I think that's what's concerning people about the longevity of these bridges. Thanks.
Thank you. No more questions, councillors. Thank you, James, for coming down and talking to us about the safety on State Highway 1, the improvements you would like to do there, and the bridge tarp. So once again, thank you very much for coming down and explaining that to us. Always welcome in Ashburton. And those two subjects are dear to our hearts. So, yeah.
And I'll make sure that the detailed information that you've asked for that I don't have today, I'll forward through Hamish.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Jenna. Councillors, get back to receipt of minutes of the Methven Community Board item number 5. Someone like to move that we receive those minutes?
I'll move.
Councillor McMillan, Councillor Todd, all in favour, please say aye. Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask you?
Oh, sorry, there's some recommendations in there which we will do. Councillor McMillan.
So the recommendation on the community board standing orders and code of conduct. Code of conduct.
So we'll do
one at a time.
Yep.
So I'll move this recommendation to council on the community board standing orders.
Seconded, Councillor Hooper. Open for discussion. There being none, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Next recommendation.
And the same with the code of conduct.
You've moved. Seconder, Councillor Hooper. Any discussion, debate? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Thank you. I think one of our guests are here yet. If not, we will move on. Are ready for our guests, Janice? And we have joining us just wait a minute. Welcome everybody. Shall we get some chairs and everyone can come to the table? welcome everybody. We've got members of the Rakatata Revival Group here to give us a presentation on your work you've been doing on the Rangitata River. Well done. We have Sally, Carl, Anna, Kim and Brad, if I understand, got the word perfect. And I'll hand over now to you to take us through your presentation, and we'll take questions at the end if that's okay. Floor's yours. Welcome.
Thank you. If I can maybe just introduce who's on the team. So Brad Edwards is the co-chair of the Rakatata Revival Program Working Group, and obviously he's representing the Department of Conservation. At the end we have Carl Russell, who's the Kamatua of Arawhenua, Runanga, and also a co-chair of the group. Sally, next to Carl, is representing Arawhenua and also represents the ground crew who are helping deliver on the restoration work in the area. And Anna, who is the program manager from ECAN of the Rakatata Revival Program, with Kim also, who's the comms advisor for the program. So we intend to sort of work through the program. The team's going to give you an overview of how it works. Obviously it represents a partnership between Mana Whenua and the 6 government agencies who are part of the Revival Program. And Ashburton District Council have been a member of that partnership since 2020. So I'll hand over to the team to take you through the slides and give you a bit of an overview.
If you just push your buttons, you'll need to speak into the microphones. When you speak, otherwise we won't be able to, people at home won't be able to hear you. We've got a couple more microphones coming.
Right, just the old material. Kia ora koutou. Ko Carl Russell tuku ingoa. Most of you folks know me. I've had a lot of involvement with CMSW and other projects in the area. So quite briefly, this project eventuated out of the big flood in 2019, and it started through a conversation we had with Bede from the Timaru District Council, and that was while the flooding was happening at the time, real time. And he literally said to us, we can't keep dealing with this on a regular basis. Our constituents are, we're paying millions of dollars every 3 or 4 years for the damage being caused. We need to do things differently. So I automatically seen an opportunity for us as mana whenua to get back some of our whakapapa and our kōrero that belongs to those waterways. So anyway, up there you see a plan that we got together with a lot of agencies ourselves, and we talked about what can we do in regards to restoration work on the Rakatata. So there's a combination of ourselves, the government agencies, district councils, Fish and Game, I think, are part of it, and what's the Northern Restoration Group, people that work up the northern part of the river. So between us, we've initiated this restoration project, and the restoration project is about getting the Mauri back for the Rakatata. So I've been involved at the initial stage of setting up. So that photo up there with those handwritten stuff, so that is some of the stuffs that we looked at that we could achieve on this waterway over quite a long period. It's not a 5-minute job. So we not only had the flooding to deal with, we also had the Peel Forest dump issue that we were dealing with, and touch wood that we actually will get stuff started with that this year or early next year, and removing that toxic waste out of there. So we've had those issues, and of course since 2019 we've had 2 or 3 more major flooding issues go through there, and of course last month or month before we just had another one go through, which is really testing the stability of that whole waterway, and what it means for the wider the local communities and the wider community. So I've been there at the initiation stage of it. I've kind of pulled back from chairing meetings after I had a medical event a couple of 2 or 3 years ago, and so that's really I've had to focus on me for quite a while. So I'm really here to support the team here that's going to fill you in on more on what the progress is that's happened up there. So that's me finished. Kia ora.
Thanks, Cal. Great segue in. Yep.
Kia ora, I'm Brad Edwards. I think it's fair to say every agency and group has had a different route into this project, and we all have our really interesting and novel story to tell. For the Department of Conservation, it began in 2018 when the Minister announced a funding and project package called Ngā Awa, and Ngā Awa was all around restoring the intrinsic values that were being lost in rivers across New Zealand, but only in a representative subset of those rivers, and that was going to be 14 of them. And the Rakitata was nominated, and we needed to follow that up with discussions. So we opened the discussions in 2018-19 with Ara Whenua. And the reason for that was that since its inception from the Minister, the initial idea was that Mana Whenua would be central to all of these projects because Mana Whenua had been unable to exert a lot of these treaty rights with regards to waterways across New Zealand. And so basically the Ngā Awa sort of thing got things on the roll for me, for the department, and we've really we've sort of piecemeal pulled in all the different agencies and partners that you see up there since then, and it's been interesting as issues have developed that have engaged more with one or the other, then we've reached out and began pulling them in. But I think it's fair to say that it's really interesting that we all have a separate story. We have an agreed vision that came out very early in the piece and was driven by Ara Whenua, and that is that with our community, we value, protect and restore the Māori of the Rakitata Awa Kia ora ki tai, and Māori being that special intrinsic power force that drives the landscape and our rivers. I'm sure Carl could talk for days on that, and he has at hearings. Kia ora ki tai being the river in its entirety. It's an important sort of concept for Ngāi Tahu in particular because it encapsulates wider land management practices, not just what you see on the landscape. It includes the metaphysical, the spiritual impacts from outside the system that are affecting it as well. So from an early stage, we've had a driving vision behind us.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for that, Brad and Carl. This is how the program started, and we are just a small representation of a big army of people who are behind us and in support, and we've got quite a solid team structure, as you can see there, and quite a few layers that are there for a really good reason. It starts with, at the very top, with the steering group members, which are chief executives or the equivalents of each organisation, partner agency, to help us with that strategic alignment and make sure that the objectives of each organisation align and we are moving together towards a common goal. The working group members are more operational layer people like ourselves. We look after the program progress, sort of oversight, make sure the resources and funding is available and respond to risks and issues as fast as we can as well. We've also got special nominated roles like technical advisors that look after the planning framework and advisors in that space. We've got cultural advisors from Aoraki Environmental like Carl and Sally and a few others. We've also got comms and engagement. Engagement is a huge element of this program, as you can imagine. We've got the likes of Kim on board as well, and someone like myself helping us pulling it all together and looking after the key milestones and the next box to aim towards. And then, of course, we've got the operational layer. So people that get their boots dirty on the ground, that know how it happens out there, that send us wonderful photos of the successes and the progress. And that's what we want to see. That's essentially what we're all here to achieve, to see tangible progress out there in the field. With that said, we've been very busy since 2019, as you can imagine, and this is what our scope of our program looks like. Since the formation of the program, we've mainly been focusing, of course, on the relationship side of things, building that strong long-term relationship amongst ourselves, solidifying our partnership, also finalising all of these work streams and kicking them off, initiating them as much as possible. We had a really good opportunity to, thanks to the funding of the Jobs for Nature that Brad has mentioned and the COVID shovel-ready funding that ECAN has received, to kickstart a lot of these work streams. And so we were able to progress them in parallel with co-drafting of the revival strategy, which is essentially the main document that outlines all of the key objectives and goals of this program. A little bit more on this in a second. Kim's going to give us a brief overview of that strategy and the next steps. This is now ready to go public for engagement with the community. And thanks to all that funding and amazing support from all of the partner agencies, we were able to kickstart all of this work, as I said, and we're already starting to see some really good tangible results.
Can I just add in it, just for a second? I just want to say that something about all of the river restoration projects nationally, and this one, is that there's been a recognition that decisions are made locally around what the structure, who's at the table, where we're going and what our vision is. We're not following a fixed set of rules to an endpoint, and that's been really taking a lot of work to work through, but it's also actually really empowering and rewarding when you are able to turn up to, members of our community and tell them that they can actually have an impact on the Awa themselves and on our project.
Awesome, thank you, Brad. So speaking of the success stories so far, one of the immediate repair works post-2019 floods was done by Environment Canterbury, again thanks to that COVID shovel-ready funding, which of course forms part of this program. This and a few other enhancement works on top of that between 2019 and a couple of months ago essentially is all now complete and is all done. This was to ensure that we are keeping our communities safe, first and foremost, bringing that level of flood protection to the restored level prior to 2019 floods, and looking for opportunities for betterment, essentially, to extend it or to build on this, essentially, on the works that have been completed. Another big part of this work is also the Peel Forest landfill remediation that Carl's mentioned earlier as well. The temporary initial works have also been done thanks to ECAN funding, and Te Muru District Council have now taken a lead role in investigating the long-term solution for us, which is a huge step, I think, for all of us, and we're really appreciative of their participation and leadership role in this space. Brad's going to tell us a bit more about the Jobs for Nature work.
So COVID threw a huge spanner in the works for everyone, but it also threw us a huge opportunity, and it happened early in the piece, in some ways before we had our strategy well developed, and that proved a real challenge to us. But basically we were presented with the opportunity to submit proposals for Crown funding as part of the central government COVID response, and that actually we had 3 bids that won the awards, and those were in the upper catchment, the upper Rangitata land care groups bid particularly around fencing and planting riparian zones. In the lower catchment we had Te Kiti Tipuranga o Hurirapa, who are the doing it business unit for Arawhenua, and they won a bid around restoring Mahinga Kai and culturally sensitive sites. And as attached to that, they also won a second bid, which was to establish a nursery. And so basically they have a native eco-source nursery up and running at Tomoka now. So essentially the scale of these things appeared a bit daunting. We were talking around $2 million per annum to each of the main projects over a 4-year life. And it has been daunting, and it's taken somewhat our focus away from developing our overall strategy and actually into having to put stuff on the ground and get stuff done at pace. And so you can see that there was a bit of a conflict there. But I think we've done well, and we now have about 18 months of funding ahead of us for these projects still. To date, we've achieved some pretty big milestones. The Upper Rangitata Landcare Group, and I say that group because the funds are awarded not to the Department of Conservation, they are awarded actually to the community doers. So they are the drivers of this work, and we stand behind them and give them advice and support, but they are the doers. They have achieved 116 kilometres of fencing in the Upper River catchment so far. They have planted over 100,000 trees. In the lower catchment, Te Runaka o Arowhenua have planted about 120,000 trees. They have established 6 specific cultural and Mahinga Kai sites within the lower Awa, and those are spread not only on Crown land, but actually approximately half of them are on private farms. So there's actually quite a co-development there with the farming community. So some big runs on the board already, and we've been very lucky to actually be able to seize the opportunity that Jobs for Nature has presented. I just want to add that although I've just talked about Jobs for Nature and the impact that's had on the landscape for revival and restoration, it actually has a very real impact for people, for personal stories, for Arowhenua. And Sal, would you be able to talk to us a wee bit about that? Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Sally Reihana. I'm a cultural consultant from AEC, Hauraki Environmental Consultancy. Today I'm here to talk to you about the Job for Nature's rōpū that we had on the screen there, out on the Rakitata Awa. So 2021 I was approached to come and lead the team, my people from our marae, and go and do this mahi out on the awa. I understand back then there was a need to help our rangatahi, our up-and-coming generation, to reconnect them with their environment, with their waters. It was an opportunity to help them understand how important that was for us as people and for the community as well. Whilst working, there was a different process that we established on the working crew to help that process happen, from very intimate, because our rangatahi came from all walks of life, very fresh to the river, to nature, and to bring them together, we changed our process on the river. It was involved the way we planted the plants, why we planted the plants, why it was important for the awa, for the life force in the awa, for our mahinga kai and for the mauri of the awa. And throughout that process, it also bonded us as team members, as community members, and it showed through the work that we put out. My team is still out there. I join them when I can. And that life force, that drive and willing to help maintain our awa is so strong. And so I'm just so proud to be here today to share with you, a dream that's still happening. Hopefully we can share that vision to the districts around us, and even be an example for the rest of New Zealand on how a little idea can just spread for the benefit of our rivers and our whenua. Kia ora.
Thanks, Sally.
So as you can see, there's actually a real personal note and gain that's made by this project. I just want to share quickly with you, very quickly. The other day I was driving past a roadwork site, and there was a worker that from Arowhenua who used to work on the awa, and he was on the stop-go. Anyway, I stopped and I said to him, what are you doing here, mate? And he said, I've been here for a month, and he said, I'm loving it. He said, I'm in my place. And I said, well, that's brilliant. And you know, I was feeling a bit glum. I felt like maybe he'd missed the opportunity. But he said to me, he said, you know, before I started work on the Awa, I'd never had a job. I'd never worked. I didn't know how to work. And so this is a sort of things that, and the stories we hear on a day-to-day basis about the very real impact that these sort of projects can have. On another note, weed control is a huge issue in the upper catchment. It is one of the underpinning control measures that we carry out to maintain the awa. Woody weed dominance in braided river systems is basically a system killer. It stabilises the ground, prevents the dynamic changes in the river flows and braids that not only destroy but create new systems and springs as well. And so weed control has always been a big issue, and the Upper Rangitata Landcare Group have always had a big role for about the last 25 years in coordinating the agencies. So that is maintained through this project. However, the scale of the input into it has increased, and we're up to around $170,000 per annum in maintaining weed control in the upper bed. I just want to add that Ashburton District Council make a contribution towards that work as part of their conservation fund, and we'd just like to thank you for that and let you know that it does make a real difference. Right, what else we got?
Could I just add?
Push it right on to Cal. There you go.
I'll just add a wee bit to what Brad's saying and support Sal. The other thing we never talked about is pest control. We have over 2,000. Is it 2,000? Mm-hmm. We have over 2,000 traps out there, and they're being monitored on a daily basis. And all I know is they're up in the thousands of the pests that they're killing. There's a real growing thing within Ngāi Tahu katoa through all our people and our runninga and that is we want to be growing healthy people. So there's a big drive within Ngāi Tahu of health as wealth. It's not just all based around dollars and cents. And I think I go back to this concept that we're doing on the Rakitata now. The late Mandy Holmes and I were trying to do this 30 plus years ago, and we were just ahead of our time. We just weren't in that right space. So what we're seeing happening now is it's unbelievable what's happening at Arowhenua. Arowhenua essentially employs over 140 people now, and 25 years ago we'd employed no one. We had no funding, so that's a huge turnaround for our people, and that so. Through our whānaus and that being employed, we're also able to increase their personal health and well-being. They're learning who they are, all that type of stuff. So what we're now seeing is this resurgence of young people coming through, because the restoration work is actually, they're learning their whakapapa. They're actually learning all that old kōrero that belongs to that waterway. So that's quite instrumental in, for people like myself. You know, I'm called kaumata, I'm called this now. It gives me that mental relaxation where I can step back and actually know that there's good people coming through, and we don't have to keep fighting that battle till we drop dead, which a lot of our old people did. So I quite often drive around, particularly when I'm around the Marae, always got a smile on my face, because this just wasn't happening 5 years ago. It just didn't exist. So AWS, our social services, health and all that social area, and that I'm one of the original trustees that set it up back in the 90s when we had one employee. We've now got 60-something employees, and it's in, they say by this time next year we could be up to 155 employees. So, you know, it's just growing, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And it's not just Māori, this is right across the board. AWS has 6,000 health clients. So in Temuka itself, we're the third largest employer in the town. So And we're competing with Fonterra and Gutsy from Temuka Transport. They're the two biggies, and we're right behind them with the next big. So that's a big step in 25 years. Go from there. So that's the growth and well-being that it's putting back into the economy, and into the wider community. So that's just the good stuff that's coming out of all of this. Yep. Kia ora.
Thanks, Carl.
So the predator control work stream has been a big theme in our project, and thanks, Carl, for introducing it so well there. Basically, predator control on braided river systems it dominates native ecosystems completely. None of the native wildlife is equipped to deal with mammalian predators. You know, even a hedgehog in a riverbed, Mr. Snuffle, you know, unfortunately, he is actually a king predator, because just by wandering around at night and using his nose, he can find nests and eggs that normally our braided wildlife, you know, are completely protected from, because, you know, they're dealing with that. They usually use camouflage as their protection mechanism. So olfactory, the use of olfactory sensors and heightened sensors to hunt and kill is something that our wildlife hasn't faced. And so the predator spin-offs are not just on the braided river system birds, but also skunks, geckos, insects, the rare spider and the rangitata, even native fish, you know. Fish spawning sites are heavily impacted upon by rodents. And so this has been a key theme that's been developed, and we now have sort of a national level a run of predator control in the rangitata from the confluence of the Clyde and the Havelock down to the ocean. We have around 4,000 traps in continuous play. Yeah, that's big, even on a national scale. And this year is the first year in the last 10 years of monitoring that a significant amount of black-fronted terns have actually fledged in the upper riverbed. So we're really hopeful we're starting to turn the tide and see the return of some of these taonga back into the awa. It's heavy on the resourcing, I tell you, and this is a struggle we're now facing as our Jobs for Nature funding is tailing off. We're faced with the inevitable questions about where do our priorities lie, how will we continue at scale, and that is really a huge thing that we're continually grappling with.
One of the key work streams across the program, I think it's fair to say, is the future of the South Branch. The Tiranango Arowhenua have expressed at multiple points, of course in history and most recently as well, the desire to reinstate the flow down the South Branch at some point in some shape. And given that the South Branch used to be a live braid of the main stem of the Rangitata River, it forms the mana of the river, right? It's one of its braids, it's one of its arms essentially. So we couldn't not look into the future of the South Branch as part of this program. Together, we created this discovery process that you can see here. I wouldn't worry too much about the detail. What it really, the essence of it is we're taking a structured approach to this. We do want to collaboratively discuss what the future for the South Branch could look like. Is it the status quo? Is it something else? Is it, you know, there could be multiple options. So we do want to bring all the right people to the table and together discuss what this future could look like so that we all agree on it and we all go for it together essentially. This process has been put together by our working group members, Arowhenua, Environment Canterbury, all of the other agencies together, and we've agreed that this will serve as a roadmap for our future steps essentially. That green box, the big green box is all of the community engagement that we are planning to undertake. So we've initiated it recently, but there's still quite a lot of conversations and quite a lot of face-to-face cups of teas around people's tables to be done for sure, in order to understand the key values and aspirations for it. And that's where we want to get to. This is about the process. This is not about the predefined outcome, I can reassure you. We do want to hear from as many people involved as possible to understand what is it that they value most over the South Branch and how can we find the middle ground to build that future for the South Branch together. We also have a governance group looking after the process, and we've actually just met second time this morning. It's called a Mana Te Mana group. People from our respective organisations, plus the infrastructure owners as well, that bring mana, that bring authority, that have that decision-making powers, to come and discuss with us what their key values and aspirations are, essentially. Again, bringing it all into the honest and transparent discussion about the future of it for the safety of the community, broader community, for the safety of us, and for the best for the hour in the long term.
Too much talking.
Brad and I were debating earlier who was going to do this slide. Kia ora, my name is Kim Whitwell. I am a Comms and Engagement Advisor at Environment Canterbury, and I also am the Comms and Engagement Lead for the program as a whole. So as Brad said before, we've been busy boots on the ground with all of the restoration work, the predator control, etc., etc. At the same time, in the background has been the development of the revival strategy, which basically sets the roadmap for how we could collectively achieve the vision of the program. The strategy itself is split into two parts. The first part has the project structure, the cultural background, and really sets sort of the kaupapa for how we work. Part two has targets and actions reach by reach. We are planning to go out for public consultation on this strategy for 1 month in September to October, and really focus on part two for what the community thinks about the drafted targets and actions, and take their feedback to hopefully reach a final version. And then comms and engagement more generally, the program has a subgroup for comms and engagement, and that has representation from all partners, and we meet monthly, talk about upcoming work streams, kind of like a work program, and plan out how we're going to achieve that. We have a presence on the DOC website currently. That's sort of the one source of truth for all the information, public information about the program. And we also have just released our first newsletter with the sign up link there. And we're planning the second newsletter to coincide with the strategy consultation. There's sort of key three work streams that are on the go at the moment. One is the strategy consultation. The second one is the South Branch engagement that Anna spoke about. And then the third one is a storytelling project, which basically is taking 8 or 9 different perspectives from people who live, work or play along the river, and facilitating and providing the platform for those people to share their stories.
And if I can make a plug for the newsletter, please do sign up. They're brief and succinct. We hope they're going to be bright and tell great stories about people doing marvellous things on the awa, but they also have dates and critical junctures for us. So it will be through the newsletter that we really start reaching out into the community for our wider consultation. So please do grab hold of that address and sign up. Right, what's next? What's coming up? Our long-term funding and resourcing remains an issue. This is the vagaries of working in an agency or with agencies, is that the funding environment rises and falls, and in some ways we have to make the most of it and seize all the opportunities that we can while they are before us. However, we are currently really starting to think ahead. In the next 18 months, we could effectively be cut right down to the bare bone. And so we're starting to talk about where we could prioritise or where we should prioritise, and we're doing that across our work streams. It's likely this is going to have a major impact, not just at our strategy level, at our higher table level, but it's likely that this impact will be felt mainly at the ground level, at the doing level. And so we need to keep exploring these as they turn up. So please, if you hear of opportunities and you think we're aligned with other work, please get hold of us and give us a bell. We're really seeking as many of these opportunities as we can. Right, what else? Our revival strategy is going out to consultation. At this stage, we've got a preliminary date penciled in of the 4th of September. Yep. That is through the Department of Conservation's website, is where our entire strategy will be available online for everyone to view and see. And there will also be the ability to have your input through a capture sheet on there. So we're really enthusiastic about getting feedback from people. Do they see the same things in the river as us, or is there segments of the community that actually has whole other sets of values that we've missed? We want to hear about all that, and we want to know, do you think the actions that we've outlined are going to work, or is there something we've missed there as well? So we're really enthusiastic about hearing back from people, and then hopefully entering into some form of adjudicated outcome, so that by Christmas we'll then have the next form of the draft strategy out. Our South Branch future design, well, this is starting to storm ahead. The Mana Mana group has just had their second meeting today, as you heard, and we are shortly going out across the wider South Branch community. So that is really with a focus on landowners. At this stage, we've tried to pull together the agencies and the other, what we called stakeholders. This tended to be the infrastructure holder people, and that was because we wanted to have the opportunity to talk about, what was the current state of play and what did we all know collectively first. So we intend to be asking those same questions across the wider landowner community in the South Branch. Maybe that one doesn't have quite as much of an engagement level with Ashburton District Council as it does TDC. In our storytelling campaign, that is coming out very shortly as well. We have a series of 7 short themes around what we call our community champions. And these are some of the people or groups that have already been really active out there on the Awa. So I don't want to give you the impression that our project has come in and done all this amazing stuff alone. There have already been some amazing players out there in our community doing incredible stuff, and we want to tell their stories and inspire our wider community. So that is what our storytelling campaign is about. So we have 7 stories coming out in video form, and some of the information that we've captured during that will also be used during the likes of our newsletters or other engagement work. And what else is going on? Well, we're all trying to push on with as much on the ground outcomes as we can. And so these operational groups that we've designed, they're in full spin now. And as you can see, I hope that through some of the milestones we've discussed today, you can see that we're making good movement to date. From our group, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to remind you there's actually a much bigger pool of people behind us than this gathering at the table, but Ashburton District Council have been great to work with, and it's been wonderful to have Hamish on our steering group providing guidance in some form of governorship and leadership. I really think my feedback to you is that that steering group is now becoming more and more confident and giving us much more direction now. So I feel like we're starting to embed and becoming quite a well-structured group. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, team, for that presentation. There's a lot of information in there which we're absorbing, and you've definitely been busy. We can see that. There's no doubt about that. And as you said, you're going out for consultation the 4th of September, and I'm sure you've got some challenges and there's also opportunities in there. So a great piece of work that you've been doing. I'll open up now, councillors, questions. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. I've signed up for the newsletter already, so that's good, isn't it? But my question was more for Sally. The work you're doing looks amazing. So with your nursery that you've got, are you collecting seeds, etc., from the river, and are all those plants going back to the Awa, or are they going to sort of different other places, I suppose, as well?
Thanks for your question. So our nursery team, we eco-source. For example, if we have a farmer up the high country who wants to restore his land, our nursery will go up there, collect seeds. bring it back, grow it and take it back there. So we
Great work.
eco-source, we grow them and return them back to where they came from. They grow better if they go back to where they came from.
Yeah, thank you.
And also it's about keeping the whakapapa where it needs to be.
Councillor Ellis?
Thank you, and just thank you for the work you're doing. It's a fantastic thing. With the challenge of funding, what do you think the chances of rolling this out to other rivers are? Because Ashburton's bounded by two fantastic braided rivers, but the other major one doesn't seem to get a lot of work done on it, being the Rakaia. So just wondering what the future of that may be.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. I think it's a very valid point and definitely something we're all aiming at. Just set this as an example of the way the partnership could work. All of the agencies are regional pretty much, and plus district councils here and there that we want to maintain a good relationship with, of course. This is a real opportunity for us to set this as an exemplar as to how this alliance partnership within the Braided River Revival space could work essentially across not only Waitaha Canterbury but also all of Aotearoa potentially. So I would say the chances are as strong as the success of this program, because the more incentivized and supported we are in this space, the more capacity and willingness essentially we have to spread out on other rivers.
Thank you. Just following on from the funding, the government obviously gave you the monies to start the program off, and as good as they are, they only do it for a short period of time and then drop it. And I think you've signalled that's what they're doing, and then others have got to pick it up if the work needs to carry on, which it probably does, but puts pressure on others to keep it going, otherwise all is lost. And no doubt you'll be looking at us, I assume, and I would just sort of feedback, is it probably a regional thing? So your employers, Environment Canterbury might be the best place for if it's deemed a district-wide benefit rather than individuals, but happy to have the conversation as we head into long-term plan, which we're heading into this coming year. So just keep that in mind. But my point really is the government, once again, set it up, take it away. Not good practice, really. Councillor Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How far along the river does this project go? Like, obviously, the river's quite long, but where is the focus? What's the length of the project?
The scope of our project, it's been decided as kia ora ki tae. We view the catchment in its entirety, and we're interested in all of the impacts that actually resonate across the main Braid Plain system. So we're prepared to look wider than the immediate riverbed and over the entire length. So as you heard today, we've had amazing engagement, particularly from the Upper Rangitata Gorge Lenke group. So that set of stations right into the headwaters have been very, very active. And that's really aligned quite well with the SNAs of both of the district councils. Just giving the landowners the power to actually decide for themselves where their priorities lie. It's amazing how they've actually naturally aligned with where we're, the department, ECAN, the district council, where we've all had our thinking, the key sites where, well, the landowners landed on the same, on the same pebbles as well. So it's actually worked out a wonderful alignment. And then obviously Arawhenua have been engaging with landowners, throughout right the way down to the coastline, and have been working right down in the Hapua with the Inaka spawning site there. So there's a lot, but there's always more hunger from more people for us to be there with them. And it's an ongoing tension we have, we've got to pick and choose a bit, but it'll be interesting to see how this develops. Our project vision is long term. We're intergenerational. We think some of these changes that we are wanting to see on the Awa aren't going to happen overnight. For the example, restoration of bermlands is natural regeneration is a slow process. And while we've worked hard to see that to date, it's going to be 50 years before we see some of the outcomes from that. And so, we're setting ourselves up for the slow burn as well as a quick race. Thank you.
Councillor Lovett?
I'm just going to ask, are you getting buy-in from landowners on both sides of the river, or is your focus mainly on the southern side of the river from top to bottom?
I think it's fair to say the landowner group on the southern side we've had more interactions with. We are active on the northern side, very much so. 10 of the 11 high country stations in the Landcare group have engaged with us above the gorge. The only one that hasn't is Hakateri Station. And so obviously we have buy-in there from Erawan, Mount Potts and Tenahorn. And then down below, we haven't had the engagement so much with the landowners down below Mount Peel running down on the northern side so much. And maybe because there's the escarpments there, there's a bit of a segregation between the Awa and a lot of that farmland. But then when we get into the lower reaches, we have started again, as we get down towards Coldstream and the river, the terraces tend to come lower and people farm out closer onto the river. We've really started to have some good engagement there with the Studhams and some of the other families in that Coldstream area.
That's good. Thank you.
Councillor Hooper?
Thank you. I was thinking about the Rangitata huts on both sides. Is there engagement with them? Is there work going on in and around their area as well as part of what you're doing?
As part of our strategy, we have work scoped and planned for both sides of the Hapua system, and that is envisaged that will engage with the hut holders. What we're expecting is that with the strategy consultation, we're expecting we're going to get a lot more themes back from them, and we're wondering about whether in particular the climate change resilience one will come through strongly, and whether they see this project as a possible conduit for them to actually have further discussions and input into maybe, is withdrawal, is armouring, or are all these things options. We've tried to scope within the strategy options so that we're not limiting ourselves for the future of those huts communities. So we're trying to signal that we think Crown-held lands behind the huts, places like that, should be held with the asterisk next to their title saying this may be required for coastal retreat. So we're trying to, we're expecting there's going to be a lot more engagement with them, I guess, is the answer with this consultation. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, thank you. There's no more questions, I don't think. So thank you very much for your presentation. Thanks for coming up and sharing that with us. We're going to break. We've just one little job to do for long service of staff. We're going to break for a cup of tea. So you're more than welcome to join us and we'll have another chat then. So we'll be about 10 minutes and 3 o'clock we'll have a cup of tea. So more than welcome to stay and have a bit more korero then. So thank you. Thank you. Katie. And Christian will do the IPSIB after morning tea, afternoon tea. Yes. Thank you, Katie. Is there anyone out there doing any work? Everyone's in here. Floor is yours.
Are you ready? Are we ready? We've got a few support crew here today, so it's not all new starters or anniversaries. So I'm very pleased to be here today to introduce 4 new employees to you all this week. Firstly, we have Brenna McRobb. Please stand up. Yes, excellent. Brenna has joined our Open Spaces team as a horticulturalist. We also have Stacey Broadbent. Stacey has joined as a library assistant. We have Maria O'Hara, and she's also joined Open Spaces as a horticulturalist. And finally, we have Shelley Donnelly, who is our new marketing advisor for district promotions. So we'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you all to ADC. We also have 3 staff for service recognition this week. Firstly, we have Ian Jameson, if he wants to stand up, and head up the front. So Ian has been recognised for 10 years service with ADC as a in our ADC, in our Open Spaces team. On talking to his manager, they had the following to say about Ian. Ian started work back when Open Spaces was known as Parks and Reserves under David Askin. He's seen plenty of change during his time, but has been a stable part of keeping our district looking great for over a decade. He welcomes any and everyone he encounters with a beaming smile and is the first to put down his tools and acknowledge members of the community. Ian is a social butterfly who can be found at every function put on by council. If he's not there, there must be a good reason why. Outside of work, he loves to play pool at the MSA. The word on the street is he's actually quite the player. Ian is a diligent worker with an important role in the Ashburton Domain. Ian works hard to keep the domain, driveways, paths and trees, gardens looking pristine. He gets on well with the Greater Open Spaces team and is a well-respected team member, always willing to help. Congratulations on this achievement, Ian. And next up, we have Steve Hanley. Steve has also been recognised for 10 years service. Apparently he did start with our next recipient as well on a similar time frame. He is one of our building officials in Michael Wong's team. Michael tells me that since Steve started with the team in July 2013, he has undertaken almost 7,000 inspections for buildings as small as a single garage to a slightly larger $56 million civic centre. So plenty of variety in his role. During his time here, he's also been building his own house. It's almost finished, he keeps telling the team. Steve is also dedicated to his job and ADC, given that he has even come in for today whilst being on annual leave. Thanks, Steve, for your commitment and loyalty. Last but not least, Neil McCann. Neil has also been recognised for 10 years service with ADC, and he has been an important and integral part of the executive team since he joined. He started at ADC as our GM Service Delivery, which was a broad portfolio that included community services. While his portfolio has changed over the years, he has still been willing to take opportunities, including now overseeing not only infrastructure services, but open spaces again. Neil has been pivotal in the development, progression and completion of major multi-million-dollar projects for the district, such as the business case for the second urban bridge, Timwell corridor upgrade, EA Network Centre build and operation, waste curbside collection move to wheelie bins, CBD streetscape upgrade, Three Waters, Ashburton relief sewers and the Methven and Mount Somers water treatment plant upgrades. His project knowledge, commitment and communication when working with external stakeholders, external elected members and staff is highly respected. It means he is often sought out by people seeking assistance with any issue, whether it is within his area of expertise or not. His support for the second best rugby team in the world continues to generate discussion and banter. He has also made a major contribution to the Ashburton community, particularly with his involvement in leadership of Mid-Canterbury Tennis. We would like to take this opportunity to thank Neil, Ian and Steve and show our appreciation for their contribution and commitment to ADC.
Thank you, Katie, and well done to the long-serving staff. It's a credit to you all. And welcome to the new staff, and let your time here be productive and enjoyable. So we will break now for a cup of tea, and you're all more than welcome to join us and have a chat and get to know us a little bit better if you wish. So we'll come back here at 3:15 for the item. Recording in 2 seconds. No giggling over there. Welcome back, everybody, for the afternoon tea break. And I'm up to item number 6, which is the update on National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity. Christian, Ian, welcome. Anything further to add to your report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report in front of you is an information report on National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity. And just to highlight a few things before we take questions, the policy statement seeks no overall loss of indigenous vegetation in New Zealand and also gives us a consistent approach to undertake SNA assessment within the country as well, and also guideline on how we manage indigenous vegetations within and outside the SNA. Convincingly, all the established activities are allowed to continue within the NPSIB. However, if the activity can lead to loss of indigenous vegetation or result in degradation of the ecological integrity, then we have to apply effect management hierarchy to undertake the assessment before the activity will take place. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Councillors, questions of the report? Councillor Lovett.
Once this comes in, like anybody wanting to build a shed or anything even on farm property, whatever, or a small subdivision, they will have to get it looked at by an ecologist and all the parties, or when does it kind of kick in, this whole structure?
Christian?
It depends on where they want to site the shed itself, if it affects an SNA or if it's within an indigenous vegetation site. If it's within an SNA, yes. If it's outside the SNA, it still depends, maybe yes or no, until we get the assessment and then talk informally on if an ecological report will be needed.
So the assessment will be at the landowner's cost, or they'll have to look at it closely before.
Through the chair, just to expand on what Christian said. Effectively, what happens is that the SNAs will be identified in the district plan. It won't be the entire, district. It will be only certain discrete parts, and it'll be an additional consideration within those areas.
Right.
And yes, you're right. It will be expected that it will be the responsibility of the landowner or the applicant to pay for those costs.
Councillor Wilson.
I'm very pleased to see that you've got in there that the SNAs, because SNAs in some areas is quite a dirty word, and we want to start off with that not being the case. We want to have a collaborative approach, and I see the assessment shall be undertaken in partnership with tangata whenua and landowners. I'm very pleased to see that in place, and I hope that carries through so that when there's an SNA, it's not a surprise to anybody, and it's logical and worked through in a common sense approach.
Yeah. Further questions? So accepting the report, they've got a recommendation here to accept the report and receives the information. What's the next steps once we've done that?
Through the chair, the next step is to begin community engagement and education on what SNA is, how to identify it, what the values are, and how we protect it. First through the Mid Canterbury Catchment Collective, which is the largest umbrella of farmers here, and after that, we'll start going to communities to host seminars and workshops with them. And also by the side, we'll be partnering with IWI to make decisions in everything that we do going forward on the NPSIB, because the policy statement suggests that we partner with them to the extent they wish to be part of it. Yep.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. And staff resources wise, we have enough to cover this? Because it sounds like quite a big job. So is there a time frame around that, and how are we looking for staff resources?
So, through the chair, Christian will probably be able to speak more to the strategy, but certainly in terms of the NPS Indigenous biodiversity, that's a really good question. It's a mammoth piece of work, and not just for us, but for the nationally. One of the big resources that is in short supply, and the council's previously submitted on this during the preparation of the document, was the fact that there's just a shortage of ecological experts like Christian in the country, and just the actual mechanics of getting out and surveying all these areas and then creating reports and then putting them through a policy cycle is going to be difficult. I think it's 5 years, was it? 5 years for implementation, but there is a provision in the NPS to ask for to be able to ask for assistance from the relevant regional council, whether that's resourcing or in terms of funding or bodies, is unsure yet. We've actually got a meeting with staff from ECAN early next week, and I'm sure that will be a question that we'll be broaching with them.
Hamish, you just add to that?
Oh, you just to add to that answer through you, Mr. Mayor, on page 16 of the report, you will see that our finance team have signalled the potential for budget implications from 2024 to 2028 because of the new work that the NPS will generate. So I think it is fair to say that there may well be cost implications for council because of this work.
That'll run through the long-term plan or the annual plan process, so alluding to it now. No further questions, there's a recommendation there. Councillor Ellis?
Happy to move.
Seconder? Councillor Grant? You speak to the motion? Councillor Brown?
No, thank you.
Further discussion, any debate? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Gets carried. Thank you. Thanks, team. Next item is the Bancorp Treasury Report. Welcome, Aaron. Anything further, Ed?
Not really. It's just Bancorp Treasury reports provided quarterly as part of contractual obligation. This one's the fourth one for the year ending 2023, so 22-23 financial year, and it's for June.
Councillor Cameron?
Thank you, Aaron. Just a quick question. I can see the fixed floating interest rate.
Page.
I'm just on the Bancorp report, page 2. I don't know, page 24. It's only 3 pages long, I think. 4 pages. I can see what we're paying for debt. You know, when it's fixed. What's the floating rate for debt? It's probably in here, but I can't.
Sorry, I'm just waiting for my screen to catch up. It's gone blank for a second.
Because we've got a bit of a split there, haven't we? Some's fixed and some's floating. Yeah, 40%'s floating and 60%'s fixed.
Yes, 60.3 and 39.7. Yeah. So you're asking about the rates?
Yeah, what are we paying? I can see the fixed because it's written down there, but what are we paying for floating interest rate?
I'd have to have a look and see what that is in the portfolio.
Okay. And just as a comment, it sort of breaks your heart when you look at the graph below that on page 24 of the document. I'm not sure on Stella what it is. It's got a picture of the line of the cost of funds, and it wasn't that long ago. We were about 2.3%. Now we sort of ratcheted it up again to 4%, 5%, yeah.
Yeah, it's all very relevant to what you get in a return on an investment as well.
Yeah, of course.
If you've got any sort of mortgage, you'll know.
That's right.
Leanne, you might have the answer to that floating rate.
Sorry, because it's in through the 85.6, and I'm guessing the two CPs, which is cash papers, will they not be floating? Page
25.
25?
Oh, go down.
5.7.
Yes, that's correct. So that would be, yeah, that would be 12 for fixed. The fixed would be the balance, the 85.
Just a question on page 23, the liquidity ratio, 112%. Could you just explain that?
So that's the amount above the borrowing, which is used to calculate the liquidity ratio. So the liquidity ratio needs to be 110%, and we're at 112.85.
Yep, that was more my question. Where should it be? Was that? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
It does show that there's quite often talked about that we've got plenty of room to borrow, but that cost of that borrowing does cost money, which does affect rates. So everybody in the long-term plan sees that, oh, we can borrow lots more money, we can borrow, but it does cost us money, and it's nearly twice as much as what it was costing a year ago, interest rate-wise.
At this stage, you're correct, yes.
Nothing's free and nothing's cheap today compared to years ago. No more questions. The recommendation there that we received the Bancorp Treasury Report. Councillor Cameron moved.
Thank you.
Councillor Todd seconded. Put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Over the page is to page 29, the financial reports. And this is the preliminary end of year financials for June 30th. Just go through them page by page if you wish. 32, 33. 34, 35.
Just like everybody to note that we have spent quite a bit more on roading, 2.5 million extra on roading, so we are spending the money where we need to be spending it. It's over budget by 2.568 at 17.4 on roading compared to we'd budgeted 14.8.
That's the income. Yeah.
Just to bear in mind that there was a flood event as well in that period.
On roading in the page 35, we received 100k for the upgrade of streetlights on the State Highway 1 bridge. It's not our bridge. Why would we receive monies for that? We wouldn't do that work, would we?
Yeah, we do that on behalf of Waka Katai. Yep.
Do the lights?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Just a quick question with regards to that.
Yeah.
Does that cover it? Does that cover your human resource cost, or is it just for the lights, or does it cover the whole?
It really is to pay EA Networks who do it. So it just goes through our payment
Oh, so you're just sort of like middleman?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Page 36 and 7. $38. $39. 40. 41. 42. 43. 44. 45. 46. Just have a comment on the stock water. It's the weed that's been growing. You have had to clean the races 3 times. It's probably a question for Neil, really. Clean them 3 times. Would you not spray them, or do you?
We do where we can, but when it's really bad, we need to physically get out and get rid of them.
Just 3 times a year seems excessive. I thought, well, for weed, yeah. Yep. Our 47. There's a question there on refuse management. The variance 684,000 over budget. Comparing that with last month's reports, we were only 140 over. It's jumped up over 540,000 in 1 month. What's happened?
The volumes, I think maybe it's the timing of the payments as they've come through. We've had increased volumes. That's on the expenditure you're referring to?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Just huge volumes coming through in that last month. And I think the previous month probably there was an additional payment that came through. So it looked a lot more this time.
Shouldn't that have been compensated with the income, with the volumes?
It should. Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
I wonder, Mr Mayor, whether the timing of the levy coming back is not, doesn't happen the same month as the cost. And also noting that if we are going to spend $5.5 million a year, you are going to be spending around about 500 or 600 every month. So that lift itself is not, as of itself, particularly notable in my head. It's the overall volume is obviously higher than we had anticipated. That's about what the monthly amount would be.
Yep.
Perhaps we could check because
Yeah.
the money's going to come from somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. In the over the page of page 48, it talks about job costs are 516K above budget, which is personnel, is it? But anyway, you'll check and come back.
Yep.
Page 49. 50. 51. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone can answer this, but the Mount Hutt Memorial Hall
Page.
on page 52. Sorry, have I gone too far ahead? Addition to sales and rental being above 65K above budget. Is that just for the month? Leanne? Oh, thank you.
Through the chair, that is for the year that they're above.
Year. I see. Okay, that's good.
You happy with that? You don't need more clarification? No. 53. Councillor Lovett.
I'm just going to ask a question on the elderly person's housing. These refurbishments, we're sort of losing money, but what is the turnaround in doing them up? Are they sitting empty for months, or what is the turnaround for getting a tenant out and refurbishing to get them back out on the market or someone in there?
So through the chair, some of those cannot be re-tenanted. They are the ones that are beyond. We cannot bring them up to an acceptable healthy home standard, and we cannot put the tenants in. Some, and there's been a couple that are long-term, and they go right back to papers that were brought to council, I want to say back in 2021, which started us on the journey. And then there's some we are at the mercy of contractors to come and do the work depending on how much work has to be done.
Councillor Hooper.
If I may add, we've actually had a particularly high turnover of tenants, which means every time there's always something we have to do.
Councillor Hooper.
Thank you. I'm just going to quickly dip back to 50, page 50, the Art Gallery Museum, the favourable variance there due to lower wages and staff-related costs. Are we at full staff back again? How did we cope? Could we save some money?
Sure.
Staff-wise?
Through the chair, did we cope? Yes. Was it a struggle? Yes. They definitely felt a pinch. Their contractor costs were slightly higher than anticipated to offset some of it, but there was an overall favourable variance. There was a position that was a fixed term role that ended, and the budget was carried forward by accident, so it wasn't spent, so that's part of that amount.
Are we back to full numbers now?
Yes, there's an employee who is on light duties, so yes in numbers, no in terms of full hours.
Thank you.
Page 53. Councillor McMillan.
At the bottom of page 52, what does it mean by work on Lake Clearwater occupation has not progressed? What does that mean?
Leanne.
Through the chair, I'm just going to have to look into that. I'm not 100% sure. I think I have the answer, but I don't want to give the wrong answer. So I will delve into that and pop it in the issue sheet, if that's okay.
Okay, we'll make note of that. Yep. Thank you. Councillor Ellis?
Thank you. The Rakaia Memorial Hall, and it's going to be a carryover request. When that comes, can we get an up-to-date scope of works and costing that needs to be done instead of just carrying the money over and it's, yeah.
Through the chair, are you talking about the strengthening?
Yes.
I'm not confident we'll have that done in time for the carryover report. I'll see who and what is available, but I'll give it my best shot.
Councillor Cameron?
Just another curiosity question. How come we've seen increased patronage at our cemeteries? I would have thought that would have been just a reflection of our population.
What page are you on, Councillor?
I'm on cemetery page, Parks and Open Spaces, page 58.
We're only on 54.
Ah, moved on. Speed it, come on.
You're dying to get there, aren't you? Page 54, Economic Development. $55. 56. Councillor McMillan.
Sorry, I'm back on page 55. Just the income from sponsorship for Glow in the Park, how much did that end up being? No idea.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you want me to find out for you how much the sponsorship was? Is that the question?
Well, yes, please, because I think
find out and come back to you.
I think before the event, we'd heard that there wasn't enough sponsorship money available, so it would just be nice to close that loop if that would be okay.
56. 57. I just have a question there under Parks and Recreation. The 686,000 variance on expenditure, which last month was 111, it's jumped up 560,000 for 1 month. And in the explanations it says there was an overspend in the Domain Cost Centre of 450,000, but how could you overspend? Well, it obviously happened, but what happened?
Through the mayor, this is something we are working on with finance. It's to do with labour costs, and it's just a split of the cost of labour. We need more work to be done on that.
Through the chair, I suspect there'll be a balance somewhere because it seems to be a lot to do with our internal and how we allocate.
Okay. 58, 59.
My cemetery question, please.
On page 58, cemeteries.
Cemeteries has seen increased patronage, therefore an increase in sales of plots.
You haven't got your light on.
I'll turn your light on, Councillor. Start again.
Do we forecast a proportion of deaths per year, and have we had an exceedingly busy year this year?
That's correct. We'd typically look at previous years and budget accordingly, and in this case we've had more than what we anticipated.
Page 60. 61. 62. 63. 64. I just see the overheads on the actual income to the actual expenditure is about $3 million difference, like favourable. Any reason for that? It's a good favourable figure, but
As you can see, the dividends and interest are a bit higher than what was budgeted. And we also had sales of vehicles that related to the replacements from last year that went through Turners this year.
yep. So my question would be, what happens to the 3 million surplus there?
Goes to the general reserve, Mr Mayor.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kevin?
I'm just going to go back to page 62, please. When I look at parking, there's been an improved operating income of 116,000 due to an explanation, due to, you know, warrants and regos and things. Will that now reflect in the next year's budget? Will it be that increased level, or how does that carry forward in that budget?
Well, we tend to take a longer term view than just a knee-jerk reaction to 1 year.
Okay.
But if there is an indication that we think that that's likely to be the sustainable level, then that's how we would budget. If we think it's a one-off, then we would lower our
And to
expectations
look
a
at the
little.
sustainable level, you'd be looking at the net last 3 years?
Yeah, and of course you've got to recall that all budgets around activity that involve our community have been hammered by COVID. And so it's very hard to understand how quickly things bounce back, to what level they bounce back to. You know, all of those issues factor into the accuracy of our forecasting.
I think that the community would be very grateful if we didn't give them fines for their non-registration stuff. That would save quite a lot of money for them. And
Well, this is not about not finding people who break the law. This is about anticipating the level of that. We will
I
simply
just
find it
fail
when
to
we
see the
find it.
connection to, you know, because we've been under severe duress as a community, haven't we, for health reasons and employment reasons and cost of living for a long time. So I can't see the connection to next year, which is only a month away or 2 months away.
Does that mean that
we're in it now?
Does that mean that the community doesn't need to register the car or have a warrant fitness on it?
No, that's not my point. My point, you're missing my point.
I think we can assure the council and the community that our level of enforcement of the law is the same.
Yeah.
We're just simply responding to what we find in that regard. And
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. I just couldn't see the relationship between, you were talking about the cost of living and the community, and I couldn't see the relationship between that.
No, I wasn't particularly talking about the cost of living in the community. I was making the point that predicting the level of all activities has been somewhat difficult because of COVID and people living their lives quite differently than they did prior and now after.
Yeah, so it would be good, so as long as we can go back and look at when we're setting the budget, presumably we do look at a graph and decide what the average is and take a punt at somewhere.
If you remember through COVID, they weren't handing out fines for regos or warrant fitnesses. They were put on hold asked by the government to do that. So there would have been less income. I think previous reports of previous years, the income was down in this area.
Maybe.
Because
I
of that.
can't recall. Yeah, you're probably right, Neil.
What, Jane?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you, we haven't got the budget for parking quite right, so we do need to tinker with it. But last year there was rates money went in, and there's not supposed to be. It's meant to be 100% user pay.
Right,
so
thank you.
we just need to be a bit careful when we're setting our new budget.
Thanks, Jane.
65. $66. I'm just looking at the service delivery, the job costing as well above budget. Did you not get better funding monies for that department? Page 66 under service delivery.
I'm not quite sure what that's referring to. Maybe Leanne can help.
Through the chair, the better off funding is for project specific, and that isn't in here at all.
I think I've used the wrong word. It's not better off funding, it's the other funding.
Transitional funding?
That's the one, yeah.
So that has been funded, and it will be reflected in increased costs and increased income.
Be in there somewhere, yep.
Yes,
I'm not sure.
We don't net off income against a particular
No, we can't.
cost, so that it will flow to both the revenue side and the expenditure side.
Right. 66 was in page 67. Just looking under plant operations, you did a review of the fleet, a fleet review, and taking the findings of the report into consideration. Will that be coming to council, that report, or is it a management report, or is it a governance report?
It's a management report, Mr Mayor. I think at a governance level, you can expect a fit-for-purpose fleet to perform the work that you decide on as a council, deciding the particular suitability of a particular vehicle, or whether it has a bald tyre or is probably less a governance issue.
Yep. 68. 69. 70. 71. And I think I asked last time on 71 was the $4 million borrowing for roading as to what projects we completed for that. I haven't had that answer yet. I've had an answer, but not that answer.
Oh, okay. Through the chair, that's my apologies. I knew we responded to what we thought was the question in the issue sheet, but you want to know what we spent that money on?
What the projects were that we spent the capital money, the borrowed money on here.
We will find that out and put that also in the issue sheet if that's okay.
Thank you. Page 72. 73. Page 74. Which takes us to the end. And we will have a recommendation to receive the 2023 preliminary financial variance report. Councillor Cameron, Councillor McMillan, any debate? All in favour, please say aye. Gets carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 9, Councillors' reports. And thanks, Erin. Covering here this local government conference, which was in Christchurch, Super Local 23 was the theme. There's a couple of reports there from 2 councillors. Any questions, councillors, on that? I'll just make a comment, and Councillor Wilson and Councillor Lovett talk about Councillor Wilson calls it the futurist, explained how AI will, how it will go forward, and on reflection after the conference. If we think climate change is a big thing, I think this is bigger, and we'll get to a stage, I think, where there'll be a point of no return with this AI. Just saying. Yeah. Very interesting speaker with an interesting topic around AI. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I attended the conference, but didn't write a report because I thought the other 2 councillors covered pretty much everything that I would have written. But I think credit to the Te Pai venue, which I think was excellent and sort of made everything a lot easier than other local government conferences I've been to. I think it was an excellent venue, and I think the conference always sort of feels quite long, being 3 days, but I think there was a lot of information that we received, and good to connect with other councillors, especially after our recent flooding event, and sort of hearing, from Selwyn councillors who were saying that Hororata township had no water at all, which was similar to our boil water situation in Methven. So yeah, really good to connect with other councillors, and I'd encourage, I think the next conference is in Wellington next year, so if anyone's interested in going, definitely put your hand up.
Yeah, I think it's going to be late August next year, and we have a policy on how many councillors can go with it being in the North Island, so the first in, first served basis, but we will inform you when that comes up, which will probably be about March next year, April next year. We'll look for people who would like to go. So there's a recommendation there, if there's no questions, to receive the councillors' LGNZ conference report. Councillor Lovett, seconded by Councillor Todd. In discussion? If not, put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Carried. Mayor's report. Questions?
Not a question, Mr Mayor, but seeing Councillor Wilson actually wrote a report. You've missed him out of your report.
I missed what, sorry?
You missed him out of your report. When you read the first line, Deputy Mayor Elizabeth Allen, Councillor Lynette Lovett and C. Hamish attended the conference.
Oh, I missed Mr Councillor Wilson. Yeah. He was there. That was done on purpose, just to test you to see that you were awake. But we will add Councillor Wilson in. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for picking that up. If no questions, I'll move that we've received the Mayor's report. Second that.
I'll second.
Councillor McMillan. Motion, all in favour, please say aye. Yeah, carried. Thank you. Well, that takes us to the end of the open part of the meeting. So I'd like to move that we move into committee. Councillor Cameron, Councillor Todd, all in favour, please say aye. Carried.